My mother-in-law faked an allergy to ruin my career, but she never expected how my new life after leaving would destroy her. "She's choking! Someone help her!" Ella's voice pierced through the Saturday brunch chatter, silencing the restaurant instantly. Grace clutched at her throat, her face reddening as she pushed away her half-eaten chocolate mousse. Her eyes, wide with panic, locked with mine across the dining room. But something wasn't right. For just a split second, I caught it, the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. A smirk. "My friend has a severe nut allergy," Ellen shrieked, phone already recording as diners turned in horror. "Who's responsible for this?" All eyes swung to me, Amber Mitchell, food and beverage manager of Savory Ridge Restaurant. In that terrible moment, I knew exactly what was happening, but it was already too late. The damage was calculated, precise, and aimed directly at everything I'd built over the past 5 years. My mother-in-law had finally found the perfect weapon. Before that catastrophic Saturday, my life ran with the same precision as the restaurant I managed. I arrived each morning at 6:30 a.m. sharp, relishing the quiet half-hour before the prep cooks arrived. The dining room, still and peaceful with chairs neatly tucked under crisp, white tablecloths, felt more like home than the small house I shared with Scott, just 10 minutes from his parents' place. Those early mornings were sacred. Checking inventory sheets against actual stock, adjusting orders for weekend rushes, troubleshooting delivery issues before they became crises. By the time Chef Daniel arrived, I'd already identified potential problems and found solutions. "Amber sees around corners," he often told the staff. "Nothing gets past her." That reputation for competence hadn't come easily. I'd started as a nervous hostess 6 years earlier, working weekend shifts while taking night classes in restaurant management at the local community college. 4 promotions later, I'd transformed into someone the owner trusted implicitly with everything from staff training to health inspections. I'd implemented a digital inventory system that cut waste by 22% and memorized every regular customer's preferences and potential allergens, especially allergies. We'd never had an incident under my watch. The community college culinary program was where Scott and I met. He had warm eyes and easy charm, dreaming aloud about the bistro he'd own someday. 3 months after graduation, we married in a small ceremony that left both our families somewhat stunned. His thought I wasn't quite polished enough. Mine worried I was rushing into marriage to escape my father's constant criticism, and my mother's enabling silence. They weren't entirely wrong. Scott represented stability and promise, a culinary school graduate with a supportive, well-connected family. What I didn't anticipate was that supportive came with expectations, particularly from Grace, my mother-in-law. Grace Mitchell presided over her corner of suburban life like a benevolent dictator. Her home was magazine perfect, her charity work strategic, her opinions delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She'd raised 3 children who all married appropriate partners, except Scott. During our first meeting, she'd examined me before asking, "And what does your father do, dear?" When I explained he was a maintenance worker at the local factory, something flickered behind her smile that never quite disappeared. The comments began subtly. "Restaurant work has such challenging hours," she'd say during Sunday dinners, always mandatory at her house, or "Scott must get so lonely." Another time, my friend's daughter just became a pharmaceutical rep. "The benefits are wonderful, and they start families earlier." When I was promoted to manager, she tilted her head sympathetically and said, "That's nice, dear. I suppose every job has a ceiling." Scott never seemed to notice these digs, or chose not to. "Mom's just old-fashioned," he'd say on our drives home from her house. "She means well." As months became years, the small house we bought temporarily near his parents remained our permanent residence, and Grace's unannounced visits became increasingly frequent. The restaurant was my sanctuary, the one place where my competence wasn't questioned. I knew every aspect of its operation, which suppliers might deliver late, which servers couldn't handle the patio section alone, how to soothe an irate customer while simultaneously signaling the bartender to comp a round of drinks. The small gold nameplate on my blazer, Amber Mitchell, Fan B manager, was my shield against Grace's subtle undermining. Chamie, our tattooed head bartender with an unused psychology degree, was the only person who fully understood the situation. She noticed the tension in my shoulders whenever Grace made her surprise visits to the restaurant, always arriving just as we hit our busiest period. "Your mother-in-law asked if I knew of any more appropriate positions for you while you were in the kitchen yesterday." Chamie told me one night as we closed up. Like managing this place was some kind of stepping stone to what? Becoming her clone? "She's just traditional," I said, focusing intently on reconciling the day's receipts. "She's a nightmare in designer clothes," Jaime countered, never one to mince words. "And Scott needs to grow a spine. Last week when she criticized your wine suggestion, he actually apologized to her for your recommendation." That was spot on, by the way. I couldn't argue. My marriage had developed hairline fractures, disagreements about family obligations, tense silences after visits with Grace, Scott's subtle resentment of my work schedule, and my frustration with his unwillingness to establish boundaries with his mother. Still, in quiet moments away from his family's influence, I caught glimpses of the man I'd fallen in love with, supportive, kind, and proud of my accomplishments. Then came the phone call that should have warned me something was wrong. Grace had called Scott directly, not me, to announce she was bringing her friends Ella and Ellen to Savory Ridge for Saturday brunch, our busiest service. "Tell Amber to reserve us the best table," she'd instructed him. "The girls are so looking forward to seeing her in her element." The way she emphasized element, like I was a zoo animal rather than a professional manager, made my stomach clench. But I smiled and nodded when Scott relayed the message, already rehearsing the polite, professional persona I would present. "You know they're coming to criticize, not support," Jamie warned when I mentioned the impending visit while reviewing liquor orders. They're just Scott's mom and her church friends, I said, trying to convince myself. They've been here before. It'll be fine. That Saturday morning I'd taken extra care with everything. I personally checked each reservation, confirmed the kitchen was fully stocked, and briefed the staff about potential VIPs visiting. Not just Grace's table. When they arrived promptly at 11:30, I greeted them with professional warmth, escorting them to our best corner table by the window. Amber, darling, you look tired, Grace said, air kissing my cheek. These hours must be so draining. Ella and Ellen exchanged knowing looks as they settled into their seats. The next hour unfolded like a carefully choreographed attack. Nothing was quite right for them. The table was drafty, the coffee not hot enough, the menu options surprisingly limited. Grace questioned each server who approached, asking about ingredients and preparation methods as though conducting a health inspection. I maintained my professional demeanor, stepping in when necessary to smooth ruffled feathers. Mom, give them a break, Scott said once, having joined the table after my text asking for backup, but he quickly fell silent when Grace patted his hand dismissively. When dessert arrived, the chocolate mousse Grace had specifically requested, despite it being clearly labeled on our menu as containing hazelnut. I felt a momentary relief. They were nearly finished. I could survive another 15 minutes. Then came the scream as waitstaff rushed to help and diners watched in horror. I stood paralyzed, not because I was afraid or uncertain, but because in that terrible moment of chaos, I caught Grace's eyes again. They held none of the panic of an allergic reaction. Instead, I saw something far worse, satisfaction. That's when I knew this was no accident. This was execution day, and I had been set up for the fall. The restaurant erupted into chaos. A customer with medical training rushed forward while another called 911. Waitstaff scrambled for the emergency kit we kept behind the bar. And there was Grace, her performance worthy of a Golden Globe, wheezing dramatically as Ellen filmed everything on her phone, and Ella shouted accusations about negligence and lawsuits. Check the menu, I finally managed to say, my voice tight with barely controlled panic. The chocolate mousse clearly lists hazelnut as an ingredient. Mrs. Mitchell specifically requested it after I personally warned her about the nuts. Marcus, the restaurant owner who'd been enjoying a rare Saturday off until getting the frantic call from our host, appeared at my side, his face ashen. Amber, what happened? He whispered. Before I could explain, Grace's miraculous recovery began. Her breathing steadied as the paramedics entered. They immediately began assessment procedures while she waved them off, her voice suddenly stronger. I think I'm all right now, she said weakly, though her eyes remained clear and calculating. It must not have been a full reaction. I'm just so careful usually. The head paramedic frowned. Ma'am, with nut allergies, there's no such thing as a partial reaction. We need to administer epinephrine and get you to the hospital immediately. Grace exchanged a quick glance with Ella. Oh, I don't think that's necessary. I'm feeling much better. Perhaps it wasn't the nuts after all. We should still transport you, the paramedic insisted. Anaphylaxis can have delayed secondary reactions. I know my own body, Grace said firmly, her weak patient act slipping. I've decided against medical transport. That's my right. The paramedics looked skeptical but couldn't force treatment. They had Grace sign a waiver declining medical transportation, a document I would later request a copy of through official channels. As they packed up, Marcus guided me into his office, shutting the door on the murmuring restaurant. What just happened out there? His voice was controlled but cold. Marcus, she's my mother-in-law. She knows exactly what's in our desserts. I personally reviewed the menu with her when they arrived. She has never once mentioned a nut allergy in the 5 years I've known her. The entire dining room just witnessed a woman nearly die from something our restaurant served, he said, cutting me off. Whether it was a misunderstanding or miscommunication doesn't matter. The perception is what counts. But no buts, Amber. I've got paramedics out there, customers who've abandoned their meals, and a social media disaster brewing. Ellen is still filming everything. My stomach dropped. You don't believe me. What I believe doesn't matter. We need to contain this situation. He rubbed his temples. Where's Scott? Shouldn't he be here supporting you? The question stung more than he could know. Scott had indeed disappeared from his mother's table during the commotion. I'd spotted him standing frozen by the kitchen doors, watching the scene unfold without approaching. When our eyes met across the room, he'd looked away first. He's around, I said lamely. Marcus grimaced. Go home, Amber. Take the rest of the weekend. We'll discuss this Monday morning. When I emerged from his office, the dining room had mostly emptied, except for a few lingering customers and staff whispering among themselves. Scott stood awkwardly beside his mother's table, where Grace, Ella, and Ellen sat huddled together, examining Ellen's phone footage. And when we slow it down here, Ellen was saying, you can actually see her face when she realizes what's happening. Not a hint of concern, just annoyance. They fell silent as I approached. Grace dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes with a napkin. Amber, darling, I'm so sorry about all this unpleasantness, she said with practiced sincerity. Who could have known that tiny bit of hazelnut would cause such trouble? You did, I said quietly, because there was never any allergic reaction. Scott's head jerked up. Amber, Mom could have died. Could she, Scott? Then why did she refuse transport to the hospital? Why is she sitting here completely fine after supposedly ingesting her allergen? Where's the epinephrine auto-injector she should carry if her allergy is so severe? Grace placed a restraining hand on Scott's arm as he opened his mouth to argue. She's upset, honey. Let's not make this worse. The only misunderstanding, I said, voice shaking, is that I thought you had basic human decency. What kind of person fakes an allergic reaction? Amber! Scott looked horrified. Apologize to my mother right now. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Shamie stood nearby, watching with undisguised concern. Other staff members averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. No, I said, surprising even myself. I will not apologize for telling the truth. Grace doesn't have a nut allergy. She ordered that dessert deliberately, knowing exactly what was in it. Ellen filmed everything because they planned this. Grace's expression hardened for just an instant before her face crumpled into a hurt maternal mask. Scott, I can't believe this, after everything we've been through today. Let's just go, Scott muttered, helping his mother to her feet. We'll talk about this at home, Amber. Oh, she shouldn't come home yet, Grace said smoothly. She needs time to calm down. We'll take you to our house for dinner. I stood rooted to the spot as they gathered their things. Ella made a show of leaving cash for the bill, far less than what they actually owed, while Ellen tucked her phone away with a satisfied smirk. This isn't over, I said quietly as Grace brushed past me. She paused, leaning close so only I could hear. You're right about that, dear. When it comes to my son's well-being, a mother does what's necessary. Perhaps now you'll reconsider your priorities. Then she was gone, Scott trailing in her wake without a backward glance at me, or the devastation they'd left behind. Shamie appeared at my side, slipping a supportive arm around my shoulders. I heard everything, she whispered. I can back you up with Marcus. But looking around at the wreckage of my professional reputation, staff avoiding my eyes, customers whispering behind menus, Marcus emerging from his office with a grimly determined expression, I knew it wouldn't matter. Grace had calculated every aspect of her performance, from the timing during our busiest service to the strategic filming that would undoubtedly make its way onto social media. She planned this, I said numbly. She came here specifically to destroy me. But why? Shamie asked. What could she possibly gain? The answer crystallized with terrible clarity. Grace had never accepted me as part of her family. My career, my independence, my influence over Scott, all threatened her control, and like a chess master, she'd found the perfect move to eliminate me from the board. Control, I whispered. This was never about allergies or desserts or restaurant negligence. It was about forcing me to choose between my career and my marriage. As I gathered my things to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Scott. Mom says I should stay with them tonight. Give you space to think about your behavior. In that moment, standing amid the ruins of everything I'd built, I realized Grace had miscalculated one crucial detail. She thought this joke would break me, force me to apologize, and ultimately surrender to her vision of what a proper daughter-in-law should be. Instead, with each passing minute, something new was hardening inside me, something cold, patient, and absolutely determined. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of hers. Monday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I'd spent the weekend alone in our empty house, my calls to Scott going straight to voicemail. Sleep had evaded me, replaced by endless mental replays of Grace's performance and the staff's faces as I'd left the restaurant. At precisely 9 a.m., I walked into Savory Ridge, spine rigid with determined dignity. Marcus was waiting in his office with Diane from HR, her presence confirming what I already knew. The restaurant wouldn't open for another 2 hours, but I could see kitchen staff peering through the pass-through window, their expressions a mixture of pity and discomfort. Please sit down. Marcus gestured to the chair across from his desk, not quite meeting my eyes. I'd rather stand, I said quietly. Diane cleared her throat. Amber, we've reviewed Saturday's incident and consulted with legal. Given the circumstances... You're firing me, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt, despite 5 years of perfect service and spotless health inspection records. Marcus finally looked at me. It's not that simple. It actually is, I countered. Grace Mitchell faked an allergic reaction. She refused medical transport because she knew a hospital assessment would reveal she was lying. But none of that matters, because the perception is already out there. The video has over 5,000 views, Diane confirmed grimly. Ellen Williams tagged local restaurant groups. Several regular customers have already canceled their standing reservations. My stomach twisted. So I'm the sacrificial lamb. We're terminating your employment effective immediately, Marcus said, sliding a folder across his desk. There's 2 months severance, a neutral reference letter, and an NDA precluding you from discussing the specifics of this incident. You want me to stay silent about being set up? The injustice hit me like a physical blow. We want to put this behind us, Diane corrected. Legal advises that countering Mrs. Mitchell's claims would only prolong the damage to the restaurant's reputation. I looked between them. These people I'd worked alongside for years. Did either of you even question why a woman with a supposedly severe nut allergy would order a dessert clearly marked as containing nuts? Or why she suddenly recovered without treatment? Their uncomfortable silence was answer enough. Your personal keycard has been deactivated, Marcus said after a moment. We'll need your office keys and passcodes before you leave. I placed my keys on his desk with deliberate calm, then pulled the name badge from my blazer. 5 years of dedication reduced to a small pile of metal and plastic. For what it's worth, Marcus added as I turned to leave. I'm sorry it ended this way. Too little, too late. Shamie was waiting outside, her bartending shift not starting for hours. She wrapped me in a fierce hug. This is wrong, she whispered. Everyone knows it's wrong. But no one's saying anything, I replied numbly. She pulled back, eyes flashing. I've got something to say. I'm putting in my notice today. Don't, I stopped her. You need this job, and I need someone on the inside who can tell me what really happens after I'm gone. The drive home felt surreal, the familiar streets suddenly alien. I'd built my entire adult life around that restaurant, my identity wrapped in professional competence, that had been stripped away in a single weekend. My phone pinged with a text from Scott. Coming home now. We need to talk. I pulled into our driveway just as Scott's car arrived. He emerged, looking tired and conflicted, his expression cautious as he approached. "So," I asked before he could speak, "how was your weekend at Mommy's house?" He winced. "Amber, don't start. This whole situation is difficult enough." "Difficult?" I echoed in disbelief. "Your mother deliberately sabotaged my career, and you disappeared to her house instead of supporting me. Difficult doesn't begin to cover it." Scott ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I talked with Mom about what happened. She admits things got out of hand, but she never intended for you to lose your job. The casual dismissal of my professional destruction made my hands shake." "What exactly did she intend, Scott?" "She says it was supposed to be a harmless prank to show you that maybe being so career-focused isn't the best approach for our marriage." The revelation struck me silent. In Scott's world, this justification actually made sense. "Maybe this is a blessing in disguise," he continued as we entered the house. "Mom always said you work too much. Now we can focus on our marriage. Maybe think about starting a family." I stared at my husband, this stranger who could witness my deliberate humiliation and somehow frame it as an opportunity. "Your mother faked anaphylactic shock to teach me a lesson about prioritizing family. When you put it like that, how else should I put it?" My voice rose despite my efforts to maintain control. "I just lost my career because your mother decided I worked too much, and you're suggesting I should be grateful." Scott's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic. It was a joke that went too far, but Mom feels terrible. She's even offering to help you find something more suitable." The following weeks blurred together in a haze of rejection. I applied to every restaurant, hotel, and catering company within 50 miles. Each time my references checked out perfectly, until they didn't. Somehow, inquiries would be made about the allergy incident. Interviews suddenly canceled. Positions mysteriously filled. Grace's connections in the local hospitality scene ran deeper than I'd realized. "You need to come to dinner tonight," Scott insisted 3 weeks after my termination. "Mom's invited everyone. She wants to make things right." I'd been avoiding family gatherings, spending my days combing job listings and my evenings drinking wine alone, while Scott worked late shifts at his restaurant. The thought of facing Grace made my stomach churn, but refusing would only reinforce their narrative of me as difficult and dramatic. Grace's dining room was filled with Scott's extended family when we arrived. Conversation quieted as I entered, curious eyes evaluating my appearance, judging whether unemployment had broken me yet. "Amber, darling," Grace embraced me with practiced warmth. "We've missed you at Sunday dinners. Come sit by me." The meal proceeded with excruciating politeness, mundane conversation flowing around me like water around a stone. Finally, as dessert was served, Grace clinked her glass for attention. "I'd like to say something," she announced. "Amber, I want to apologize publicly for the unfortunate misunderstanding at your restaurant. I never intended things to go so far." Murmurs of approval circulated the table. Scott squeezed my hand encouragingly. "In fact," Grace continued, "I have a proposition. The church fundraising committee needs help organizing our monthly bake sales. It's only a few hours a week, perfect for someone with your temporary flexibility." The table erupted in supportive comments. "How thoughtful. What a perfect solution. Grace always finds a way to help." I remained silent, fork motionless above my untouched pie. "Well," Grace prompted, her smile tightening, "isn't that a lovely opportunity?" Every eye fixed on me, waiting for appropriate gratitude. "Thank you for the offer," I finally said, each word precision carved from ice. "I'll consider it." Grace's smile faltered at my lack of enthusiasm, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. It's not as though you have competing obligations." The table tittered with laughter. Later that night, unable to sleep beside Scott's gently snoring form, I went downstairs to check email on our shared laptop. Another rejection waited in my inbox, the fourth that week. As I closed the message, I noticed Scott had left his email open in another tab. Without conscious decision, I clicked on it and froze. There, in an ongoing thread with Grace titled Amber's Job Hunt, was evidence of betrayal so profound it stole my breath. Scott had been forwarding my job rejection emails to his mother. Their exchanges mocked my growing desperation. "Another one today?" She cried for an hour. "Maybe now she'll consider Mom's church offer," Scott wrote. Grace's response, "Patience, dear. She's still being stubborn. Once she accepts this isn't just a little setback, she'll come around." Scott again. "I don't know how much longer I can take the drama. It was just a joke. She acts like her life is over." With trembling fingers, I scrolled through weeks of private humiliation made public entertainment. Every tear I'd shed, every moment of vulnerability with my husband, had been fodder for Grace's amusement and Scott's betrayal. Something vital snapped inside me that night. Not my spirit, but something else entirely. The last fragile threads of love, trust, and belonging that had kept me tethered to this family. I closed the laptop, suddenly calm in a way I hadn't been since that Saturday at the restaurant. I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not tomorrow, not next week, but right now, while the clarity of true, complete abandonment still sang in my blood. They thought I was alone in the rubble of my former life. They were wrong. I was the rubble, and I was about to become an avalanche. I worked quickly and methodically in the dark hours of morning, packing only what mattered: 2 suitcases of clothes, my professional certificates carefully tucked into a folder, and the external hard drive where I'd just saved screenshots of Scott and Grace's email thread. The rest, the wedding photos, the accumulated trinkets of our marriage, the life I'd built around Scott's family, could stay behind in this house that had never truly felt like mine. 3 weeks earlier, after that first rejection letter, I'd sent a carefully worded email to Daniel, our former head chef who'd left Savory Ridge the previous year for a position at a gastropub in Edinburgh. Just testing the waters, I'd written, casually asking if he knew of any management opportunities abroad. His enthusiastic response had surprised me. Funny you should ask. We just lost our Fan B manager and can't find anyone with your level of expertise. I'd pursued the conversation as a distant contingency plan, never truly believing I'd need it. Now, as I booked a one-way flight using our emergency credit card, I felt nothing but cold certainty. The note I left on the kitchen counter was brief. I need space to rebuild what your family destroyed. Don't follow me. Don't contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. I didn't cry at the airport, nor during the 8-hour flight across the Atlantic. Whatever tears I might have shed had crystallized into something harder, something that would sustain me through what came next. Daniel met me at Edinburgh Airport, his familiar face a relief among the sea of strangers. Christ, Amber, he said, hugging me awkwardly, you look like you haven't slept in weeks. I haven't, I admitted, following him to his rusted hatchback. Thank you for this, for everything. Don't thank me yet, he warned as we navigated the rainy streets of Edinburgh. The place isn't exactly Savory Ridge. It's smaller, older, and the owner's a proper Scotsman, which means he's both the most generous and most demanding boss you'll ever have. The small apartment Daniel had helped secure was above a bookshop in Stockbridge, a charming neighborhood with colorful doors and cobblestone streets. Just one bedroom with a kitchenette and a bathroom where the shower leaked, but crucially, it was mine alone, an ocean away from Grace's machinations. Malcolm Fraser, owner of the Tartan Table Gastropub, was a barrel-chested man with a salt and pepper beard and an intimidating scowl that dissolved into crinkled eyes when he smiled. He looked me up and down skeptically during our first meeting. Daniel says you're some kind of organizational wizard, he said, his Scottish accent thick but warm. We'll see about that. 2-week trial. No promises beyond that. I started the next morning, arriving an hour before the prep cooks, just as I had at Savory Ridge. The kitchen was smaller, the equipment older, but the principles remained the same. I spent that first week observing, jotting notes about inefficiencies, outdated processes, and missed opportunities. The staff watched me warily. The American interloper brought in by Daniel, taking detailed notes about their work. They think you're a spy sent to get them sacked. Fiona, the sharp-witted head server, informed me during my second week. Might want to explain yourself before Angus puts salt in your coffee instead of sugar. That afternoon, I called a brief staff meeting before the dinner service. Standing before these strangers, I felt the ghost of my former confidence stirring. I'm not here to report on anyone or change everything overnight, I began. I'm here because I lost everything back home and need a fresh start. But I do have ideas that could make all our lives easier if you're willing to try them. The honesty seemed to work. Tight shoulders relaxed, suspicious glances softened. Let's hear these miraculous ideas then, challenged Angus, the dubious sous chef. I outlined simple changes first, reorganizing the storage system, adjusting prep schedules to reduce overtime, implementing a digital inventory system similar to what I'd created for Savory Ridge. Small improvements that wouldn't disrupt their workflow, but would yield immediate benefits. Malcolm approved a test run of my suggestions, watching with bemused interest as I tackled the chaos of their supply closet one rainy afternoon, emerging dusty but triumphant 6 hours later with a system that would save them hours each week. Not bad, he admitted grudgingly, which Daniel later translated as high praise. During those first exhausting weeks, I worked double shifts, learning Scottish recipes and terminology while helping with everything from inventory to table service. At night, too wired to sleep despite bone-deep fatigue, I'd open my laptop and document everything about Grace's prank in meticulous detail. Dates, conversations, witnesses. Shamie had sent security footage showing Grace's perfectly normal walk to the bathroom after her attack, along with statements from staff, who'd overheard suggestive comments from Ellen about teaching Amber a lesson. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this growing dossier of evidence. All I knew was that someday, when I was ready, I wanted irrefutable proof of what they'd done. 3 months into my Scottish adventure, my temporary position became permanent. 6 months in, Malcolm promoted me to senior management after my inventory system reduced their food costs by 18%. The staff, initially suspicious, now sought my advice and included me in their after-work gatherings at the corner pub. You've landed on your feet here, Daniel observed one evening as we walked home through the misty streets after closing. Don't think I've ever seen Malcolm trust someone so quickly. I'm just doing what I know, I replied, though privately I recognized that I was flourishing in ways I couldn't have at Savory Ridge, constrained by Grace's interference and Scott's passive acceptance of it. Edinburgh felt like home in a way nowhere in America ever had. I loved the medieval architecture juxtaposed against modern life. The lilting accents that had initially confused me but now sounded like music, the way strangers called me love, or hen with casual warmth. I changed too. My wardrobe shifted from the conservative business attire Grace had always criticized to comfortable, colorful pieces that suited my new life. I'd cut my hair short, a practical choice for the windy city that also felt symbolically freeing. Most importantly, I'd stopped flinching at my phone when it chimed with notifications. Scott had sent dozens of messages in those first weeks, shifting from confusion to anger to pleading. I'd responded only once. I meant what I said. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Grace had tried more creative approaches, even having friends of friends reach out about coincidentally planning trips to Edinburgh. I blocked them all. The unexpected opportunity came 10 months into my Scottish reinvention. Malcolm called me into his small office one afternoon, looking uncharacteristically serious. Need to talk business, he said gruffly. Doctor says I've got to slow down. Heart's not what it was. My stomach dropped. Malcolm, I'm so sorry. He waved away my concern. Not dying yet, just need to step back a bit. Daniel's a brilliant chef but couldn't manage a grocery list, let alone a business. He fixed me with a steady gaze. You, on the other hand. I stared at him, not quite comprehending what he was suggesting. I'm offering you partnership, he said bluntly. 25% now, with option to increase. You've turned this place around, made it profitable in ways it hasn't been in years. The staff respects you. I trust you. I don't know what to say, I managed, genuinely stunned. Say yes, Malcolm shrugged. Or don't, but decide quickly because my cardiologist is breathing down my neck about reducing stress. I said yes, of course. How could I not? From unemployable pariah to restaurant partner in less than a year. An outcome Grace could never have anticipated when she orchestrated my downfall. That night, as I signed the preliminary partnership papers at my small kitchen table, I allowed myself a moment of vindication. I hadn't just survived, I'd thrived. My phone pinged with a social media notification. The first time I'd allowed myself to post anything about my new life, a simple photo of the Edinburgh skyline at sunset, with the caption, New Beginnings. Within minutes, I received a message from Scott. Is that where you are? Please, Amber, we need to talk. I closed the app without responding, but with a newfound sense of calm. Let him wonder, let them all wonder. For now, I would focus on building something new, something entirely mine that couldn't be undermined by manufactured allergic reactions or family manipulations. The woman who'd left that note on Scott's kitchen counter 11 months ago had been desperate, betrayed, and broken. The woman reviewing partnership documents in Edinburgh was something altogether different. Stronger, certainly, but also patient. The kind of patient that comes with absolute certainty that someday, somehow, the scales would balance. And when they did, no one would be laughing. I ignored Scott's message that night, but something told me it was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, my social media post about Edinburgh sparked a slow trickle of communication from back home. First came likes from former coworkers, then cautious comments about how well I seemed to be doing. I posted a few more carefully curated glimpses of my new life, the gastropub's stone facade with its newly painted sign listing me as partner, the view from Arthur's Seat after a morning hike, the traditional Scottish breakfast that had become my weekend ritual. Each post was strategic, revealing my success without detailing how I'd achieved it, and each one tightened the noose of curiosity around the necks of those who dismissed me. The next message from Scott arrived a month after the first. Amber, please. I miss you. I've been thinking about visiting Edinburgh. We could talk in person. I showed it to Fiona during our morning coffee ritual at the cafe across from the restaurant. Her eyebrows rose over the rim of her mug. So, the husband finally realizes what he's lost. Does he? She asked, her Scottish accent thickening with disapproval. Only took him, what, a year and a fancy job title, to come crawling back. He's not crawling, I corrected, though a small vindictive part of me wished he were. He's curious. There's a difference. And are you planning to satisfy this curiosity? Fiona had become my closest friend in Edinburgh, her no-nonsense approach to life helping me rebuild my self-worth brick by stubborn brick. I sipped my coffee considering. Not yet. The timing isn't right. The timing, as it happened, became clearer 2 days later when an email from Grace appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, Family Reconciliation, but the content revealed her true intentions. Dearest Amber, we've all been so pleased to see you flourishing in Scotland. Scott shares your lovely photos with us, and we couldn't be prouder of what you've accomplished. By happy coincidence, my church group is planning a UK trip this summer, focusing on religious history sites. Edinburgh features prominently on our itinerary. I was hoping you might recommend accommodations and dining options for 15 ladies of a certain age. Perhaps you could even arrange a special dining experience at your establishment. We'd so love to see you in your element. This could be a wonderful opportunity for healing old wounds. Time has a way of putting things in perspective, doesn't it? With love, Grace. I read it 3 times, noting the clever construction. No direct apology for destroying my career. No acknowledgement of her deliberate sabotage, just the presumptuous expectation that I'd be grateful for the chance to serve her and her friends again, this time on my new turf. I didn't respond. The floodgates opened after that. Scott's cousin Megan, who'd never bothered to learn my name at family gatherings, messaged about her daughter, who was considering hospitality management and would benefit enormously from your mentorship. Uncle Bob, whose retirement hobby was making barely edible hot sauce in his garage, emailed about potential distribution opportunities in the UK market. Even Scott's sister Kate, who'd laughed the loudest at Grace's church bake sale offer, reached out about a potential girls' trip to Scotland. Each message carried the same undertone, you have something we want. Your success is only valuable insofar as it can benefit us. I stored each communication in a growing digital archive. Chamie continued to be my eyes and ears at Savory Ridge, sending updates whenever my name arose in conversation. Marcus mentioned you yesterday, she wrote in one message. Apparently, their new manager can't handle the inventory system you created. They're considering hiring a consultant to decipher your spreadsheets. The delicious irony wasn't lost on me. The most revealing message came from Scott after 3 months of increasingly desperate attempts to engage me. Mom says she's willing to forgive the way you left. If you're ready to come home, we could start fresh. I miss my wife. I stared at those words on my phone screen while sitting in what was now my office at the tartan table. The sheer audacity. Grace was willing to forgive me. After everything she'd orchestrated, after the career she'd destroyed, and the marriage she'd undermined, she positioned herself as the magnanimous party extending grace to the wrongdoer. That night, I began organizing what had become an extensive collection of evidence. I created digital folders, each named for a key player in my downfall: Grace, Scott, Ella, Ellen, Marcus. Inside each, I compiled every damning piece of evidence specific to their role. In Grace's folder, security footage Jamie had smuggled out, showing Grace's miraculous recovery in the restaurant bathroom immediately after her allergic reaction, walking normally and checking her makeup while Ellen adjusted her camera settings, medical records from her regular checkups confirming no history of food allergies, screenshots of her messages to Scott about my job search humiliations. In Scott's folder, his text messages to friends describing me as dramatic and overreacting, email exchanges with his mother planning the Sunday dinner where Grace had offered me the church position, framing it as an intervention for my unhealthy obsession with status, his casual revelation to a mutual friend that he'd always found my career ambitions a bit embarrassing since he'd expected a more traditional wife. Ella and Ellen's folders contained their social media posts mocking my termination, private messages Jamie had screenshot from mutual acquaintances, and statements from other waitstaff who'd overheard them planning the prank before Grace's performance began. Marcus's evidence was perhaps the most damning. Emails from the restaurant's lawyer advising against termination without proper investigation, which he'd ignored in his haste to contain the PR damage. I compiled it all methodically, creating backups on multiple devices, not yet knowing exactly how I would use it, but understanding its power. Each folder represented a person who had deemed me expendable, worthy of mockery, or simply collateral damage in Grace's campaign to control her son's life. My phone chimed with yet another message from Scott, thinking of booking a flight next month. We really need to talk in person, Amber. This time, I responded, if you're coming to Edinburgh, I suggest early June. The weather is better. His reply was instantaneous. Really, that would be perfect. Mom's church group will be there then too. Of course they would. I leaned back in my office chair, staring at the rain-dappled window that overlooked the cobblestone street. For a year, I'd been rebuilding myself from the ground up, not just professionally but personally. I'd discovered strength I never knew I possessed, forged genuine friendships based on mutual respect rather than obligation, created a life that was authentically mine, rather than a compromise designed to please others. And now, the architects of my destruction were planning to visit, expecting accommodations, recommendations, special treatment, all while framing it as an opportunity for me to be forgiven for the sin of refusing to remain their victim. What are you thinking? Malcolm asked, finding me still sitting in the darkened office hours later. You've got that look that usually precedes a major menu overhaul or inventory revolution. I smiled, feeling a calm certainty settle over me. I'm thinking it's time to prepare for some very special guests. American friends visiting? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. Not friends, I corrected quietly. Family. The kind that only remembers your existence when they need something. Malcolm's bushy eyebrows rose. Ugh, the worst sort then. The very worst, I agreed, closing my laptop with a decisive click. But don't worry, I'll make sure they receive exactly what they deserve. June arrived with unusual sunshine that bathed Edinburgh in golden light. I'd spent the preceding weeks preparing for my visitors with the same meticulous attention I once devoted to inventory spreadsheets. Every detail was considered, every contingency planned for. You sure you want to do this? Fiona asked as we shared breakfast at my apartment the morning of their arrival. You could just ignore them. Let them wander around looking for you while you take a lovely holiday somewhere else. I smiled, buttering my toast with steady hands. I've been ignoring them for over a year. That was necessary while I rebuilt my life. But now I want them to see exactly who I've become and exactly what they threw away. Scott was scheduled to arrive first, his flight landing at noon, with Grace's church group following in the evening. I'd booked Scott into a small hotel near the tartan table. Not the most comfortable accommodation in Edinburgh, but certainly not the worst. Grace and her friends would stay at the more upscale Royal Mile Hotel, as befitted their expectations. I dressed carefully that morning. Dark jeans, a crisp white button-down, and the soft leather jacket I'd purchased with my first partner's dividend. Professional, but not trying too hard. Successful, but not showy. The woman I'd become, not the woman they'd expected me to remain. At precisely 2 p.m., I walked into the hotel cafe where Scott waited. His face lit up when he saw me, then faltered slightly as he registered the changes. My shorter hair, more confident stride, the absence of the nervous smile I'd always worn around his family. Amber, he stood, arms outstretched for a hug I didn't step into. You look different. Great, but different. A year will do that, I replied, sitting across from him rather than beside him. How was your flight? He launched into a detailed account of travel inconveniences, jet lag, and his first impressions of Scotland. The same self-centered monologue I'd listened to for years without realizing how little space it left for my own thoughts or experiences. I nodded politely, studying his face. He looked older, slightly heavier around the middle, with new worry lines etched around his eyes. Mom's excited to see you tonight, he eventually said, reaching for my hand across the table. I moved it to my lap before he could make contact. Her group arrives at 7. I thought maybe we could all have dinner together, catch up properly. I've arranged a private dining experience for them tomorrow evening at the tartan table, I said neutrally. Tonight doesn't work with my schedule. His face fell slightly. Right, of course, you must be busy with your job. The hesitation before job spoke volumes. He still couldn't quite comprehend that I now co-owned a thriving establishment. Partnership, I corrected mildly. And yes, running a restaurant takes considerable time and attention. Speaking of which, I added, I should get back for the dinner service preparations. Already? He protested. But we've barely talked. I came all this way. The entitled whine in his voice was so familiar it almost made me laugh. We'll have plenty of time to talk tomorrow, I assured him, rising from my seat. I've cleared my afternoon specially. Back at the restaurant, I finalized preparations for the next day's special event. Malcolm watched with raised eyebrows as I arranged for our best private dining room to be reserved for Grace's church group. You're giving them the royal treatment? He asked skeptically. After what they did? Trust me, I said, checking the table settings one final time. It's not kindness driving this particular hospitality. That evening, I sent a single message to the email addresses I'd compiled. Scott, Grace, Ellen, Ella, Marcus, and several other family members who'd participated in my humiliation. Check your inboxes at noon tomorrow for some information you might find interesting. Then I turned off my phone and slept more peacefully than I had in months. The next morning dawned clear and bright. At precisely noon, as Edinburgh's church bells chimed across the city, I hit send on the carefully prepared emails, each recipient receiving the specific folder bearing their name, containing evidence of their personal contribution to my downfall. I waited at the restaurant, reviewing the evening's special menu with our chef, when my office phone rang. Grace's name flashed on the caller ID. Hello, Grace, I answered calmly. What is the meaning of this? Her voice shook with a combination of rage and fear I'd never heard before. Recording private conversations, stealing security footage. This is illegal. Actually, it's not, I countered smoothly. Scotland has one-party consent for recordings, and the security cameras at Savory Ridge were disclosed in your customer agreement. As for the medical records, those were provided voluntarily by your doctor's office after I explained the situation. Apparently, faking allergic reactions for personal gain is frowned upon in medical circles. You've always been vindictive, she hissed. Scott was right about you all along, was he? Interesting that you'd say that when I have dozens of messages showing it was your idea to sabotage my career, not his, though he was certainly an enthusiastic participant. What do you want? The question came out strangled, her customary control slipping. Money? Is that what this blackmail is about? I'm not blackmailing anyone, Grace. I'm simply sharing information. What you choose to do with that information is entirely up to you. I hung up as Scott's call came through on my cell phone. His voice was unrecognizable, choked with emotion. Amber, please, I can explain. I never meant for things to go so far. Mom was just trying to help us spend more time together. By destroying my career and publicly humiliating me, I said, keeping my voice level. That's an interesting approach to marriage counseling. I was weak, he admitted. I should have stood up to her, but I've changed. I miss you. We can start over. That's not possible, Scott. I filed for divorce. The papers are in your second email attachment, below the screenshots of you mocking my job search with your mother. Your signature is all that's needed. The silence stretched between us, 5,000 miles and a gulf of betrayal that could never be bridged. Will you at least see me? He finally asked. Before I go back? I'll see all of you tonight, I confirmed. 7 o'clock, private dining room. I prepared something special. Marcus was next, a curt professional call acknowledging receipt of the evidence and requesting a meeting with his legal team. This puts us in a difficult position, Amber. It put me in a difficult position a year ago, I reminded him, when you fired me without investigation for an incident that was entirely fabricated. The settlement offer arrived by express courier 3 hours later, a substantial sum that acknowledged wrongful termination without technically admitting fault. I signed immediately, having already decided exactly where the money would go. At 7 o'clock, I stood at the entrance to our private dining room as Grace's church group filed in, Scott trailing behind, looking shell-shocked. Grace's face was carefully composed, though her eyes darted nervously between her friends, who seemed oblivious to the morning's revelations. I welcomed them professionally, introducing our chef, who described the evening's special menu. Everything proceeded with perfect Scottish hospitality until dessert. As the plates were cleared, I stood at the head of the table. In honor of our special relationship, I said, I've prepared something meaningful for each of you. Servers distributed elegant envelopes to each person. Inside was my business card with my new title, Partner, Highland Table Restaurant Group, along with a note informing them that, in their names, I had donated the entire settlement from Savory Ridge to the Food Allergy Research Foundation. Some jokes, I added quietly, looking directly at Grace, age better than others. The silence was absolute as understanding dawned across their faces. No accusations, no dramatic confrontation, just the elegant symmetry of consequences finally finding their rightful owners. I nodded to the staff to continue service, then walked calmly back to my office, leaving them to digest more than just their desserts. Later that night, after the last of Grace's group had departed in uncomfortable silence, Fiona found me in my office reviewing tomorrow's reservations, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Well, she prompted. How did it feel? I considered the question carefully. Not as vindictive as I'd imagined. Mostly final, like closing a book I never need to open again. And the ex-husband soon, I suppose? Scott signed the divorce papers right at the table, I confirmed. First time he's ever made a decision without consulting his mother first. Fiona laughed, raising her glass of whiskey and a toast. To new beginnings. No, I corrected her gently. To perfect endings. Outside, Edinburgh's evening lights twinkled across the ancient city that had become my true home. A year ago, I'd arrived broken and betrayed, carrying nothing but professional certificates and shattered trust. Now I stood whole, stronger for having been broken, wiser for having been fooled. Grace's little joke had cost me a job, a marriage, and a life I thought I wanted. In return, it had given me something far more valuable, the unshakable knowledge of my own resilience, and the sweet, satisfying taste of justice served at precisely the right temperature.